A University of Alberta team is examining whether mechanisms from hibernating snails could protect human hearts under stress. This is Planetterrian Daily, episode 163. Researchers at the University of Alberta are exploring how cellular processes observed in hibernating snails could translate to protection for human heart tissue. The work focuses on survival strategies that allow the snail to endure extreme conditions without damage. This line of inquiry examines metabolic slowdown and tissue preservation during periods of low activity. The team aims to identify conserved pathways that might apply to cardiac stress in people. Next steps include testing whether these mechanisms can be activated in mammalian models. Now, shifting to a very different area of research. A University of Surrey experiment showed that even moderate traffic noise reduces the stress-lowering effects normally provided by birdsong and natural sounds. Participants exposed to combined audio tracks displayed smaller drops in physiological stress markers compared with those hearing birdsong alone. The study measured cortisol and heart rate variability to capture the difference. Results suggest that background anthropogenic noise can mask or interfere with beneficial acoustic signals. Researchers intend to test mitigation strategies in real-world green spaces. The University of Surrey study on traffic noise demonstrates that background sound can blunt the physiological benefits of birdsong even at moderate volumes. Participants showed smaller reductions in stress markers when natural audio was paired with traffic recordings. This finding adds a mechanistic layer to understanding why urban green spaces sometimes deliver less restoration than expected. It also points to a practical lever through reducing local noise to restore some of the calming effect without changing the soundscape itself. Most people assume that any exposure to birdsong or natural sounds will reliably lower stress, yet traffic noise can interrupt that pathway even when the natural audio remains audible. Right now, as you listen to this, your auditory system is filtering competing signals, and the presence of low-level engine rumble appears to reduce the drop in cortisol and heart rate variability that birdsong normally produces. The University of Surrey experiment quantified this interference by comparing physiological responses across controlled audio conditions. One memorable observation is that the masking effect occurs at volumes many would describe as ordinary rather than extreme. The next time you seek a calming walk in a park near a road, notice whether the traffic layer changes how restored you feel afterward. Paying attention to that difference may encourage simple adjustments, such as choosing routes farther from traffic or using sound mitigation features in urban design. On a different note, a study of sea turtle nests moved for conservation found that relocated eggs produced smaller and slower hatchlings than those left in original sites. Researchers tracked development metrics across multiple clutches to quantify the differences. The findings indicate that nest microclimate and handling influence early locomotor performance. These changes could affect survival rates once hatchlings reach the ocean. The team plans additional monitoring to determine whether the deficits persist beyond the initial period. While noise disrupts human recovery pathways, human interventions can also affect early life performance in other species. New findings on strep A infection have been welcomed by the Heart Foundation for their potential to reduce downstream cardiac complications. The research targets the bacterial mechanisms that trigger immune responses, leading to heart damage. Investigators are mapping how early intervention might interrupt progression to rheumatic heart disease. The work builds on established links between untreated strep A and long-term cardiovascular risk. Further trials will assess whether refined diagnostics can improve outcomes in affected populations. From infection-driven cardiac risk to how inherited traits shape individual responses to common diets. A study reported that individuals with certain genetic variants experience sharper LDL cholesterol increases on low-carbohydrate diets, especially when saturated fat intake remains high. The findings help explain why similar dietary changes produce divergent lipid responses across people. Researchers analyzed genetic profiles alongside dietary records to identify the relevant markers. The work highlights the role of inherited metabolic traits in dietary outcomes. Future analyses will examine whether personalized fat intake guidance can moderate these shifts. Individual metabolic differences connect to population-level measures of healthy functioning. Researchers have established population-level reference values for productivity-adjusted life expectancy in Finland for the first time. The metrics combine life expectancy with measures of health-related functional capacity and workability. Data were drawn from national health surveys to generate age-specific benchmarks. The resulting norms range from 43 to 46 productive healthy years on average. These figures will serve as comparators for future public health interventions. Texas A&M researchers are evaluating prickly pear cactus as a source of both biofuels and functional food ingredients. The multidisciplinary project examines the plant's chemical composition across different growing conditions. Suzanne Talcott leads the effort to identify valuable compounds that could support rural economies. Early work focuses on extraction methods that preserve both energy-dense and nutrient-rich fractions. Field trials will continue to assess yield and processing efficiency. The team is also comparing performance under varied irrigation and soil regimes to refine selection criteria for commercial planting. A review in Nature discusses challenges in using translation reprogramming to treat rare diseases caused by large genes. The authors outline technical barriers that arise when target transcripts exceed typical size limits for current delivery systems. They describe how ribosome and tRNA engineering approaches might be adapted. The piece emphasizes the need for improved vector capacity and specificity. Ongoing work will test whether these modifications can expand therapeutic reach. The review notes that several large gene disorders remain outside the scope of existing reprogramming platforms. An Israeli study found that mutations occur more frequently at DNA sites that resist bending. Researchers mapped mutation hotspots against structural models of DNA flexibility. The results suggest that mechanical properties of the double helix influence where errors accumulate during replication or repair. The team used genomic sequencing from tumor samples to validate the pattern. Additional experiments will explore whether altering chromatin architecture can shift mutation rates. The work provides a structural framework for predicting mutation-prone regions across different cancer types. Researchers developed a purification method to isolate geometric isomers of zeta-carotene and tested their UV shielding and antioxidant activities. The isomers displayed distinct spectral properties and varying capacities to protect skin cells in laboratory assays. One form demonstrated stronger photoprotective effects than others under controlled light exposure. The work positions zeta-carotene as a candidate natural ingredient for topical applications. Further formulation studies will assess stability in finished products. The purification protocol also allows comparison of isomer abundance in different plant sources. A 30-year conservation program has increased the wild adult population of the critically endangered Galapagos snapdragon from 6 individuals in 2007 to 28 today. Nursery-grown plants were reintroduced to 2 sites, supporting natural recruitment. Monitoring shows the new adults are healthy and established. The effort combined habitat protection with targeted propagation. Continued surveillance will track whether the population sustains growth without further intervention. The program also documented successful seed set in the reintroduced cohorts. Passive acoustic devices on a gill net captured real-time vocalizations and movement data from a porpoise during entanglement. The University of St. Andrews team analyzed the recordings to document escape attempts and call types. This is reported as the first detailed acoustic record of such an event. The data reveal behavioral sequences that were previously unobserved. Analysis of additional deployments will determine how common these patterns are. The recordings include both burst pulse calls and tonal signals produced during the entanglement sequence. Research published in Environmental Research Ecology analyzed how land use patterns and fuel treatments can reduce fire spread into developed areas. The author concludes that strategic redirection of resources could address much of the exposure risk within roughly a decade. Simulations compared current conditions with optimized protection scenarios. The work emphasizes combining resistant land uses with vegetation management. Implementation pilots are proposed to test the timeline in specific regions. The modeling framework incorporates both ember production and surface fire spread rates. Penn State researchers collected black ash seeds across the species range and established common gardens to evaluate genetic variation. The study supports future reintroduction efforts threatened by emerald ash borer. 3 experimental plantings now hold material that may supply seeds for forest recovery. Genetic analysis identified diverse lineages suitable for different site conditions. Long-term monitoring will assess survival and growth across the gardens. The collections include representation from northern, central, and southern portions of the species distribution. A study found that animated explanations of aerosol transmission raised willingness to adopt protective behaviors more effectively than text or static images. Participants viewed short videos depicting virus spread through air and then reported intended actions. The format improved comprehension of invisible transmission routes. Researchers measured changes in attitudes before and after exposure. Follow-up work will test whether the effect persists in community settings. The animations were designed to illustrate particle movement over time rather than static diagrams. Population health benchmarks close with a note on how environmental context continues to shape recovery and resilience across species. 2 new studies this week underscore how environmental context shapes both physiological stress responses and species recovery trajectories. That covers today's science and health news. Share this with someone who's curious about the latest research. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you next time. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network. Links in the show notes. One more thing. If you liked today's episode, our sister show, First Principles Daily, is worth a spot in your feed. Reasoning from raw materials, not analogy, on the breakthroughs that actually cut cost. It's one of the NARA Network's daily briefings, all free at naranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at naranetwork.com/gallery. Royalty-free under Creative Commons. Download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.